Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Rob Simonds and I'm the board president of the Downtown Chamber Series. And I'm joined today by Evan Shinners, our first performer of 2023. And Evan's going to be joining us with an incredible, a memorable, a challenging program on January 8th and 9th at Legend City in downtown Phoenix. So the Goldberg Variations is one of my most favorite compositions. And whereas pianists are well known for bringing programs that are incredibly eclectic, pieces by different styles and different styles by different composers from different centuries, you're bringing one piece by one composer. However, in this single work and its many variations, and it's right there in the word, like there's variety in these variations, this piece opens up a whole world of expression. Can you describe for us how this piece is structured and what the audience might expect when they attend?
Sure. So they're variations not in the conventional sense, like there's no theme in variations. There's no melody that's being ornamented upon, varied, improvised upon, right? What it is actually a bass line. So it's variations over a harmonic structure. So we can think of it like that, first of all. And that's very interesting for our minds. Immediately, we think that what's not happening is that we don't have something on the top that's being explored. We have the harmony and the structure itself. I mean, that sets Bach apart from you know, other composers when he does something like that. So what happened was earlier in Bach's life, Handel had published a set of, I'm embarrassed that I don't know if that's either 60 or 62 variations or 64, but it's, I think maybe, I should know that, but the theme or the bass line itself is just 8 notes, and then he does this either 60, 62 or 64 times. So Bach, he takes this idea, and as he often would do, he would take an idea to the next level. He would say, that's something good. I'm going to bring that form into perfection. So he quadruples the length of the bass line. He takes it from 8 bars and puts it into 32 bars, and the result is that you have a lot more freedom with the harmony. It goes into the relative minor, whereas Handel's do not. And then he writes 30 variations, 4 times as long, so the piece becomes something completely substantial compared to Handel's variations. And of course, you know, like one of these towering achievements of Western civilization, the fact that this work exists. And it's late Bach. Late Bach is very interesting because his schedule, he was a church musician most of his life. And his schedule was, you know, writing these large orchestral and vocal compositions every week, just week after week after week of working so hard, you know, to get out these often 30-minute orchestral compositions every single week, not to mention having to compose something like the St. Matthew Passion, which is a 2.5-hour piece of music in about 3 weeks. Just staggering productivity this guy had. But when he was, you know, in his mid-50s, in his early 50s, he lived till 65, his work schedule was greatly reduced, but he didn't stop composing. It's just that he could turn his attention to things that were more theoretical in nature, less practical. The art of fugue, the second part of the Well-Tempered Clavier, variations for organ on a church melody, and the musical offering, something like this. These are all these works that have kind of more or less theoretical origins. And what he's doing is he's saying, okay, I've done everything. You know, I've really done everything. I've solved the problems of tonality. I've defined string technique and wind technique and vocal technique and organ technique, just everything that you could, you know, a single composer in their lifetime could hope to do one of those things. And Bach had already done all of these. And he says, so I have this amazing potential. And now I just want to shrink the cell of what I'm working with to see if I can go in there and extract from smaller and smaller bits of information more music. So something like the Goldberg Variations, we can see he decides to take 30 variations from just these 32 bars of bass lines. And like I was saying, it's late Bach, so everything from late Bach is sort of a summary of everything that's happened in music, from Palestrina to what his sons are doing, modernism for Bach, the classical style, the origins of the classical style. So you have like a record. It's like a record of all the historic styles that existed: the Italian style, the French style, the North German organ style, the old style, the old Palestrina vocal style, and then the purely theoretical style, the canons, manipulating one line of music and copying it and pasting it into a different part, so that from one line of music you have two lines. And it's
Evan, it's a really, I love the way you described that, and I think it's a great context to think about. This is late in the career of one of the great masters. It reminded me of a professor I had, not a music professor, but Arthur Brooks. He teaches public policy. He wrote a new book recently on the changing expectancy in your career, in one's career, and he uses Bach as the model. So he talks about early in life, you are pushing the frontiers and whatever you're doing. It could be physics, it could be economics, it could be literature, it could be painting, it could be music. And that the people who progress into the second half of their life in a synthesizer's role, that he uses Bach as like the extreme, like the perfect example of this, where you are synthesizing all these things. You talked about, this sort of multi-stylistic, the different multicultural, I guess, in a way, Italian, French, German styles, German folk music, and putting into something that can only be done by somebody who has lived and worked in a medium for so long. Oh, like a lot of listeners, I fell in love with this piece through the 1955 recording of Glenn Gould. And he wasn't the first person to play this on piano, but I think a lot of us associate this music with the piano. But it was originally written for harpsichord. I was wondering if you could describe for us some of the challenges and some of the advantages of performing this on a modern instrument.
Right. Yeah. Well, so Bach is like all truly great minds, it becomes sort of a mirror for our time. And like, Shakespeare being staged for hundreds of years in different settings, and we always take something new from whatever setting we're in. We say, wow, even people in Shakespeare's time were dealing with that very common emotion that we're dealing with today. Bach was like that, is like that. And when Gould came along, I think the reason why it all of a sudden clicked with people is because we were entering a very mechanized age, possibly envisioning, the era of computers and things like that. I mean, Gould, what he did with the music is almost digitized it. I think it resonates with people because it's just, he presents it so coldly with, I want to say, without emotion. I mean, it's his emotion, which is a very straightforward mechanical one. But I think that we associate this piece with the piano and with Gould because it was at that time when we were ready to receive Bach like this. But all throughout history, we've received him in different ways. So from Busoni, right, the early 20th century, the late 19th century, we received the Goldberg Variations in a much more romantic way, where we still sort of thought about the heroes like Tristan, and Orpheus, and that had a meaning to the people in that culture. No longer you talk to someone about Tristan on the street today, you're born in the wrong century. But so the Goldberg Variations are like that. And now we're entering an interesting phase in humanity where we're curious how it would have sounded in Bach's day. I think actually we're probably obsessed with that. So to be a Bach pianist is sort of like a hypocrisy, you know, it's the wrong instrument. And I'm stubbornly making the case that there are still advantages to play on the modern instrument. Though I'm not quite sure. It's, let's see, it's Wednesday right now, and the concert is on Sunday, first one. So I'm not quite sure if I'm going to do this, but right now I'm trying to practice playing the piece on actually 2 pianos, because this is a work that's not written for a harpsichord with only 1 manual. And like the other works from Bach that are written for 2 manuals, it's very different. You have a lot of pieces written for two manuals. It's a harpsichord with two keyboards, one on top, one on bottom, and they sound different. That's the point, is that they sound like 2 different instruments. They're not, it's not just pyrotechnics or something like this. They sound different. But with those pieces, you play a little bit down here, then you play a little bit up here, and maybe you have some of this going, you know, one keyboard accompanying the other, but there's still very, that you can do that on the piano. You can mimic that sound on the piano. What you can't mimic on the piano are these crossings that are so characteristic of the Goldberg Variations. And it really, when you start studying the music of Bach, the organ music, especially written for 2 keyboards and things like that, there's a style where he's thinking, this is 2 keyboards as in 2 colors, and this is 2 keyboards as in 2 instruments, and this is the latter. And that's why I haven't played the Goldberg Variations in public in like 10 years for this reason, because I always feel, you know, like the music isn't coming across. So again, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull it off by Sunday, but I am trying to play it on 2 pianos right now. It's only for a few variations. The majority of the piece does work perfectly fine on 1 keyboard on the modern piano, but there are just a couple effects that are really, they don't work on 1 keyboard on the piano. I think
it's interesting to note that another life this piece has, so to speak, is that it's been transcribed for lots of different ensembles. And one particular is a string trio version of it. And it's, when you're, as a listener, as a non-pianist myself, and listening to this, it's amazing to me that one person can produce this much volume, this quantity of notes, and the added sort of technical parts I can imagine of that at a whole different wrinkle. But I do think it's a notice that we do experience this music being played by literally different instruments, so violin, violoncello, flute, and harpsichord. I mean, any number of things that it really is in some ways made for more than one person, and obviously, to your point, made for more than one instrument. What we gather as an audience to listen to a performance like this, really any performance, I love the communion part of concert as a performer, as an audience member, but also recognizing that experiencing art and creating art, for that matter, is a very democratic experience. It's a very individual thing. I was wondering if you could talk us through maybe some guidance you might have for someone sitting down who maybe doesn't know this piece, or maybe heard it in the background somewhere. How do you think about letting this music unfold for you? Do you have any guidance on that?
You know, it's like, I guess I referenced Shakespeare, but it could be like any great piece of art that once you encounter it, you know that it's there, and you know that it's there for the rest of your life. And you'll go through the ride once, you know, it starts out with this aria and then it ends with this aria. So at least you know that. And then you might have parts that you recognize in the middle. But the point is that it's there for the rest of your life, and it will define you like great art does. It will define you and your relationship to life the more you listen to it. And certain things will appeal to your intellect now, appeal to your intellect in 10 years. So I suppose just try and remember how you felt when you listen to this. It's 80 minutes of music. I'm going to talk a lot through it so that, I'm not just going to throw you in the ocean, but sort of I am, it's still 80 minutes of music. And, listen to it and remember how you felt and read about it and hear other people play it. And I mean, it's like it's one of the great achievements of Western civilization, and like those great achievements, they're there to be revisited, and your relationship to yourself when you heard it is also meant to be revisited. Yeah.
I love that. It reminded me when I was an undergraduate in music school, and I took some Mozart into a lesson, and for string players as violinists, intonation and style is so challenging in this music. And as a lot of young violinists, you're also playing a lot of incredibly virtuosic, showy music. And my teacher kind of slowed me down, and she said, she used to call everybody Sugar Plum, Miss DeLay. She said, Sugar Plum, you're going to be living with this music for the rest of your life. This other stuff, this virtuoso stuff, yes, get it right down, but this is something you're going to live with forever. And again, I'm not a pianist, but I'm an avid listener of Bach solo keyboard works. And what has always struck me about this piece is that on some days, even though I know it, I don't know by heart, but I know how it goes. I know what's coming next. Some days I'm startled by how jagged the change between variations are. And on other days, it just seems like to me one prolonged piece. I mean, going back to your point about this bass line that more or less stays constant through the work, that this architecture, I think, speaks to you as a first-time listener, as a long-time listener, and your relationship, at least my relationship to it changes from day to day. Evan, I'd love to wrap up and ask you about your unfolding relationship with the Downtown Chamber Series. It's not your first time. You're a very popular performer on the series. I wish you could talk a little bit about your relationship to the series, performing for this audience, and performing in Phoenix. What does it mean to you?
I love being in Phoenix. I like, hiking in Phoenix. It's great, and the audience is, a familiar one. So I feel comfortable trying out new things. I think last year I played the Art of Fugue, and it was the first time I had played that in public. And now, whether or not I decide on the actual two pianos, it will be for this audience, because we're all friends and very, very comfortable with one another. So yeah, I mean, it's a great way to start my year.
Okay, Evan, thank you so much for your time. And again, the concerts are January 8th and 9th at Legend City. I'll put a link to buy tickets in the description, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, thanks.